question comes up, why did Jesus die on the cross? We usually respond with an answer, to save us from our sins. But to me, that doesn't just answer the question. It brings up more questions, like, why would he want to save us from our sins? That is simply because he wants to have a personal relationship with us. Well, why would he want us to have a personal relationship with him? That's because he loves us. We sometimes separate the love of the cross and God's sacrifice on the cross and treat them like they're two different things. But in reality, they're exactly the same and they go together. In 1 John 3:16, it says, we know what love is because Jesus died for us. That type of love that God showed was agape, which is an unconditional and true love. That's different from the eros, which is like a romantic love between a man and a woman, and phileo love, which is between friends. Christ's death on the cross showed us that true love, that agape love, is sacrificial, that it gives without ever expecting anything in return. In Mark chapter 12, verses 41 and 44, it tells the story of a Pharisee and a widow. And this story shows the difference between agape love and phileo love. Now back then, the Pharisees thought they were like all that in a bag of chips. They were like the religious elite. And everyone wanted to be like them. They had social standing, they had education, and they had money. They could give something away and not worry about it because they already had an abundance. So one day this Pharisee, walks up to the altar, places his tithe down, and probably says in a real loud voice, he's like, here you go, priest, here's my tithe for the week, just so everyone can hear it. And then the people praise him for it. They praise him for keeping with the law. They praise him for tithing. And the reason the Pharisee tithed that way is not out of love of God in his heart, but for the desire to get the praise and adoration of the crowd. But the widow, however, the widow was different. This widow, she had nothing. She probably just had the clothes on her back. She probably had no shoes. And back then, widows didn't have the education and social standing. And they didn't have money because the husbands earned the money in the household. So she walks up there with these 2 copper coins. It's all she has. It's worth less than a penny, and she places it on the altar. And because that tithe was smaller than that of the Pharisee probably mocked her and made fun of her for it. So she gave it all without expecting anything in return. Why would she do that? There's a poem called Sacrifice by Edgar Guest that helps to edify this point. It goes like this. When he has more than he can eat, to feed a stranger is not a feat. When he has more than he can spend, it isn't hard to give relent. Who gives but what he'll never miss, will never know what giving is. The widow's mite to heaven went, because real sacrifice was meant. So what did this widow have that the Pharisee didn't? It was a desire to show love to God, not a desire to see how much recognition she could get. And that's the depth of why Jesus went to the cross for us, to die for our sins and to show us that love. She gave it all to God to show how much she loved God, and God gave it all to us to show how much he loved us. And after he gave us Jesus on the cross, he didn't do it with an ulterior motive like the Pharisee did. He gave us Jesus purely and simply out of love of his heart. He was well aware of the fact that we might not ever go after it, because we have free will. We can choose if we want to or not. And we don't have to, but he gave us it anyways because he loves us. And just like the widow's tithe pales in comparison to that of the Pharisees, so Jesus pales in comparison to that of the world. Because the world thinks Jesus' love and sacrifice is a myth. It's a fairy tale. It's mysterious. They don't understand it, and it's too hard. So they follow the easier path. They follow the world's path. And yes, following Jesus is hard. But how hard was it for that widow to give up everything she had? It was extremely hard. It was probably the hardest thing she had to do. But she did it because she knew God's love was priceless. So let me ask you, what have you given up to God? Because God gave you his son. He gave you his son to die with arms wide open. Not just because he was crucified this way, but because he wants to embrace you. As we stand and look upon the cross, if we look at just the sin part of it, we may become overwhelmed that he died for our sins. That guilt that we have of our sins, we may turn away from the cross. And if we look at just the love part of the cross, we may take it too casually and become like the Pharisee. But if we look at them both together and put them together and treat them like it's a relationship, because that's what it is, we see the true power and depth of God. So let me ask you, have you taken this step? If not, I encourage you to do so, because it's the greatest adventure you'll ever have. Thank you.